The medical bay of Nexus Station hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced alien technology, but beneath the sterile lights and gleaming surfaces, desperation painted a far different picture. Zara pressed her small blue hands against the transparent barrier that separated her from her mother's bed, her large purple eyes streaming with tears that caught the artificial light like scattered gems. "Please," she whispered for the 100th time that day, her voice barely audible above the medical equipment's rhythmic beeping. "She needs the treatment. The doctor said she needs it now, or—" Her voice broke, unable to finish the sentence that had haunted her nightmares for weeks. Dr. Keltharn, the station's chief medical officer, stood nearby with his clipboard, his 6 eyes avoiding the child's gaze. His insectoid features remained impassive, a mask of clinical detachment that had served him well throughout his career. Behind him, 2 council guards flanked the entrance, their ceremonial armor gleaming with the authority of galactic law. "Child," Dr. Keltharn's voice carried the weight of tired repetition. "I have explained this numerous times. The advanced cellular regeneration treatment is restricted to council-approved species only. Your mother's condition, while unfortunate, does not qualify for an exception. The Zilani are not recognized as a protected species under current galactic medical protocols." Zara's small frame trembled with a mixture of exhaustion and fury that seemed too large for her 7-year-old body. "But you have the medicine right here. I've seen it. That blue liquid in the tubes over there, that's what she needs. The scanner showed her cells are dying, and that medicine can fix them." The doctor's mandibles clicked in what might have been annoyance, or perhaps something resembling sympathy. "The child understands more than most adults," he thought to himself, but protocol was protocol. The Galactic Council had spent centuries establishing order from the chaos of thousands of different species, and that order depended on strict adherence to established hierarchies. The Nexus Emergency Protocol clearly states, he began reciting from memory, that advanced treatments are allocated based on species classification, galactic citizenship status, and resource availability. The Zilani possess no official standing with the Council, no trade agreements, no military alliances. They are, in essence, unrecognized by galactic law. Through the barrier, Zara's mother, Linz, lay unconscious, her normally vibrant blue skin now pale and mottled with dark patches that spread like shadows across her face and arms. The cellular degeneration disease that had struck her people's remote colony was aggressive and merciless, but entirely treatable with the proper medical intervention. The irony was not lost on anyone present that the cure sat merely meters away, locked behind bureaucratic barriers as impenetrable as any physical wall. The medical bay's main doors hissed open, and 3 figures entered that immediately shifted the atmosphere in the room. Commander Thrace of the Hegemony military strode in with the confidence of someone accustomed to having their orders followed without question. His scaled green skin bore the ritual scarification that marked him as a veteran of the border wars, and his yellow eyes swept the room with predatory assessment. Behind him walked Counselor Vex, a tall, ethereal being whose species had long ago transcended physical needs through technological integration. Half of his face was organic, the other half a masterwork of cybernetic enhancement that glowed softly with internal processors. His presence commanded immediate respect, or fear, from most species in the galaxy. The third figure was Dr. Elon, the Hegemony's leading medical researcher, whose work on genetic classification had helped establish many of the current medical protocols. Her 4 arms moved with practiced efficiency as she examined the data on her portable scanner, her large black eyes reflecting the cold light of scientific objectivity. "Dr. Keltharn," Commander Thrace's voice rumbled with authority. "We're here for the weekly inspection of restricted medical supplies. I trust everything is in order." "Of course, Commander," Dr. Keltharn replied quickly, his posture straightening. "All advanced treatments remain properly secured and allocated according to Council specifications." Counselor Vex, cybernetic, I focused on the small figure of Zara, still pressed against the barrier. What is this child doing in the restricted medical section? Surely there are protocols about unauthorized access. Dr. Kelthorne's discomfort was visible in the way his antennae twitched. The child's mother is a patient. Terminal cellular degeneration. The child has been persistent in her requests for treatment approval. Persistent. Dr. Elon's head tilted with clinical interest. How long has the child been here? 18 standard days, Dr. Kelthorne admitted. She sleeps in the waiting area, survives on water and nutrition dispensers. Security has attempted to remove her several times, but she always returns. Zara turned from the barrier, her tear-stained face now burning with desperate hope. "Please," she cried, rushing toward the newcomers. "Are you important people? Can you help my mom? She's dying, and they have the medicine, but they won't give it to her because we're not the right kind of people." The council guards moved to intercept the child, but Commander Thrace held up a scaled hand, stopping them. His yellow eyes studied Zara with the intensity of someone evaluating a potential threat. "Child," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "the medical protocols exist for good reason. Resources are limited. Order must be maintained. But the medicine is right there." Zara pointed desperately at the storage units containing the cellular regeneration treatment. "There are hundreds of doses. You're not even using them all. Please, she's all I have left. My dad died when the sickness came to our colony. Mom, and I came here because someone told us the council helps people. Please don't let her die too." Counselor Vex's expression remained unchanged, but his organic eye seemed to flicker with something that might have been consideration. The child makes an emotional appeal, but emotion cannot override established law. The Zilani chose to settle in unregulated space. They chose to reject council protection and oversight. Consequences follow choices. Dr. Elon stepped closer, her scanner now focused on Zara herself. "Interesting," she murmured. "The child shows signs of the same cellular degradation beginning in her system. Early stage, but progressing. Without treatment, she will follow the same path as her mother within approximately 40 standard days." The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of medical equipment and Zara's quiet sobbing. The mathematical certainty of Dr. Elon's diagnosis hung in the air like a death sentence written in clinical terminology. "Then, the problem will resolve itself naturally," Commander Thrace stated with cold practicality. "One less unregistered alien to deal with on council stations." Dr. Kelthorne's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme discomfort. In all his years of practice, he had never seen such complete indifference to preventable suffering, but he also knew better than to challenge council authority directly. Zara sank to her knees beside her mother's barrier, her small hands pressed flat against the transparent material. "Mama," she whispered, I tried so hard, but they don't care. They don't care at all." The heart monitor connected to Lynn's began to fluctuate, the steady rhythm becoming erratic as her condition worsened. Dr. Kelthorne checked his instruments with growing alarm. Her cellular integrity is failing faster than projected. Without immediate intervention, she has perhaps hours remaining. "Then, document the time of death when it occurs," Counselor Vex replied with mechanical indifference. "Ensure proper disposal procedures are followed for unregistered alien remains." As the three officials turned to leave, conducting their inspection as if the dying woman and grieving child were merely furniture in the room, Zara's voice rose in a cry that seemed to echo from somewhere deeper than her small lungs should have allowed. "Somebody help US. Please. Anybody. She's dying and nobody cares. Mama, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." Her wail of anguish carried through the medical bay, down the corridors of Nexus Station, past the commercial sectors and diplomatic quarters, reaching into every corner of the massive structure that housed representatives from across the galaxy. It was a sound that spoke to something primal and universal, the cry of a child watching their world die while the powerful looked away. In the docking bay, 3 levels below, a group of humans who had just arrived on a diplomatic transport heard that cry echo through the station's ventilation system. They exchanged glances that spoke volumes without words, their faces hardening with an expression that had once struck fear into enemies across countless battlefields. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, veteran of the Titan mining wars, set down her travel bag and listened as the child's voice carried through the metallic corridors. "Did you hear that?" she asked her companions. Corporal James Mitchell, whose left arm bore the scars of plasma burns from the Outer Rim conflicts, nodded grimly. "Sounds like someone's in trouble." Master Chief Robert Chun, whose weathered face had seen more battles than most species could imagine, stood up slowly. His dark eyes held the kind of controlled fury that had made human soldiers legendary among friend and foe alike. "Gentlemen, lady, I believe we have a situation that requires our immediate attention." Dr. Sarah Kim, former battlefield medic turned diplomatic medical advisor, grabbed her emergency kit. "If that's a child in distress, we have protocols that supersede any diplomatic niceties." The four humans moved with the coordinated efficiency of people who had learned to rely on each other when everything else failed. They had come to Nexus Station for routine diplomatic consultations, but they carried with them something that had become humanity's most feared and respected trademark throughout the galaxy. They carried the absolute, unshakable conviction that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the odds, the opposition, or the consequences. As Zara's cries continued to echo through the station, the humans made their way toward the medical bay with the grim determination of people who had never learned how to walk away from someone else's suffering. Behind them, in the diplomatic quarters they had just left, the human ambassador received an urgent message from Earth Command. The message was brief, but carried implications that would soon reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. The Terran Federation had just approved the Compassion Protocol. For the first time in galactic history, an entire species had officially declared that they would go to war to protect the innocent, regardless of species, citizenship, or political affiliation. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone made humanity's children cry. The medical bay doors burst open with a force that made the council guards instinctively reach for their weapons. But what entered wasn't an invasion force or security threat. It was something far more dangerous to the established order. Four humans walking with the quiet confidence of people who had never learned to back down from a fight worth fighting. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos took point, her combat boots making no sound on the medical bay floor despite her rapid approach. Her dark eyes swept the room with tactical precision, cataloging threats, exits, and opportunities in the space of seconds. Behind her, Master Chief Chun moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent decades turning impossible situations into merely difficult ones. Dr. Sarah Kim went directly to where Zara knelt beside her mother's medical barrier, while Corporal Mitchell positioned himself where he could observe the council officials and guard simultaneously. The coordination was seamless, born from countless shared battlefields where such precision had meant the difference between life and death. "Hey there, sweetheart," Dr. Kim said softly, kneeling beside Zara. Her voice carried the gentle warmth that had comforted wounded soldiers across a dozen war zones. But her eyes burned with controlled fury as she took in the scene. "My name is Sarah. I heard you calling for help." Zara looked up through her tears, her large purple eyes widening at the sight of the strange alien woman with soft pink skin and kind brown eyes. Are you here to help my mama?" "We're going to try," Dr. Kim replied, already scanning Lens through the barrier with her portable medical scanner. The readings made her jaw clench with professional rage. "This woman has advanced cellular degeneration syndrome, easily treatable with standard regenerative therapy. Why isn't she receiving treatment?" Dr. Keltharn's antennae twitched nervously as he found himself suddenly caught between his established protocols and the intense scrutiny of these newcomers. "The humans, I presume? I am Dr. Keltharn, Chief Medical Officer. The patient is not eligible for advanced treatment under Council medical protocols. The Zilani are not a recognized species." Master Chief Chun stepped forward, his presence seeming to fill the room despite his average height. His voice was quiet, conversational, and absolutely terrifying in its controlled calm. Doctor, I want to make sure I understand the situation correctly. You have a dying woman and her child here. You have the medicine that can save the woman's life, but you're choosing not to use it because of paperwork. Commander Thrace bristled at the human's tone, his scales rippling with indignation. Human, you forget yourself. This is a council station operating under council authority. Your species may have certain privileges due to your recent diplomatic agreements, but you have no jurisdiction here. Staff Sergeant Santos turned to face the commander, her expression pleasant and completely predatory. Privileges? Is that what we're calling it now? She glanced at her companions with dark humor. Did you hear that, Chief? We have privileges. I heard it, Sergeant, Chin replied, never taking his eyes off Dr. Kelthorn, though I prefer to think of it as a mutual understanding. We help keep the peace, and, in return, the galaxy tries not to give us reasons to get upset. Counselor Vex cybernetic components words softly as he processed the subtle threat in the human's words. You speak as if your species has some claim to moral authority. Yet your own history is filled with violence, warfare, and brutality toward your own kind. Dr. Kim looked up from her scanner, her medical training warring with her growing anger. You're absolutely right, Counselor. We've done terrible things to each other throughout our history. We've fought wars over resources, territory, ideology, and sometimes just because we were afraid of what we didn't understand. She stood slowly, her hand steady but her voice gaining strength. But you know what we learned from all that violence and brutality? Enlighten me, Vex replied with mechanical curiosity. We learned that some things are worth fighting for. We learned that standing by and watching innocents suffer when you have the power to help them makes you complicit in their suffering. And, most importantly, her voice hardened to match the steel at her eyes. We learned that anyone who uses rules and regulations to justify cruelty isn't maintaining order. They're just bullies with fancy titles. The room fell silent except for the increasingly erratic beeping of Lynn's heart monitor. Zara clutched DR. Kim's hand, hope and terror warring in her young face as she watched these strange aliens argue over her mother's life. Dr. Elon stepped forward, her forearms moving in complex gestures as she consulted her data. The humans present an interesting case study. Their species exhibits unusual behavioral patterns when confronted with what they perceive as injustice. Statistical analysis suggests a high probability of violent intervention if their demands are not met. Corporal Mitchell laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Doc, that's the first smart thing anyone in this room has said. We do have a tendency to get violent when people hurt kids and let innocents die for stupid reasons. Are you threatening council authority? Commander Thrace demanded, his hand moving to his weapon. Threatening? Master Chief, Chun shook his head slowly. Commander, if we were threatening you, you'd know it. Right now, we're having a conversation about doing the right thing. The question is whether this conversation ends with everyone walking away happy, or whether it ends with us filing some very uncomfortable reports back to Earth Command. Dr. Keltharn found himself caught in an impossible situation. His medical oath demanded that he help the dying woman, but his position required adherence to council protocols. The humans had presented him with a choice he had been avoiding for 18 days, and their presence made neutrality impossible. The treatment protocols exist for valid reasons, he said weakly. Resource allocation, prevention of dangerous precedents, maintenance of established order. Dr. Kim interrupted, her voice cutting through his justifications like a surgical laser. I've read your medical records. You've published 17 papers on cellular regeneration therapy. You've saved thousands of lives across dozens of species. You became a doctor to heal people, not to watch them die because of bureaucratic nonsense. She gestured toward Zara, who was watching the adults argue with the desperate attention of someone whose entire world hung in the balance. Look at this child. Look at her mother. In your professional medical opinion, divorced from politics and protocols and all the other garbage, If you treat this woman right now, will she live? Dr. Keltharn's 6 eyes focused on Lynn's, seeing her not as an unregistered alien or policy problem, but as a patient. Yes, he whispered. The treatment would halt the cellular degradation and begin regenerative processes. Full recovery would take approximately 72 hours. Then, what exactly are we talking about here? Staff Sergeant Santos asked, her voice deceptively casual. We have a sick woman, available medicine, and a doctor who knows how to use it. Seems pretty straightforward to me. Counselor Vex Organic I narrowed while his cybernetic one word through calculations. The implications of providing unauthorized treatment go far beyond this single case. If word spreads that council protocols can be ignored when sufficient pressure is applied, it could destabilize medical resource allocation across the galaxy. Master Chief Chen nodded thoughtfully. That's a valid concern, Counselor. Let me offer an alternative perspective. He moved closer to the cybernetic being, his posture relaxed, but somehow radiating barely contained danger. If word spreads that the Council lets children watch their parents die, for paperwork reasons, especially when humans are around to witness it, that could destabilize a lot more than medical protocols. Are you suggesting that your species would take military action over a single alien's medical treatment? Dr. Ilan asked, her clinical fascination evident in her tone. Dr. Kim looked up from where she was comforting Zara, her expression incredulous. You really don't understand us at all, do you? Military action? Lady, we don't need military action. We just need to go home and tell people what we saw here. She gestured around the medical bay, encompassing the dying woman, the crying child, and the officials who had the power to help, but chose not to. We'll tell them about a little girl who spent 18 days begging for her mother's life, while people with the ability to save her stood around discussing protocols. We'll tell them about a medical station with enough medicine to treat hundreds of people, but regulations that only allow it to be used for the right kind of beings. Corporal Mitchell picked up the thread seamlessly. And then we'll mention that this happened on a council station, under council authority, with council officials present. We'll be very factual about it, very objective. The human media networks have a reach of approximately 47 billion people across 700 colonies, Staff Sergeant Santos added helpfully. They're particularly interested in stories about children in danger and bureaucratic indifference. Commander Thrace's scales had begun to pale as the implications sank in. You would turn this into a propaganda campaign against the Council. Propaganda? Master Chief Chen shook his head. Commander, propaganda involves distorting the truth. We'd just be reporting exactly what happened here. The truth doesn't need any embellishment. The heart monitor's beeping became more irregular, drawing everyone's attention to Lynn's deteriorating condition. Dr. Keltharn checked his readings with growing alarm. Her cellular integrity is approaching critical failure. If treatment doesn't begin within the next 30 minutes. Zara's renewed sobbing cut through the room like a blade, her small voice breaking as she pressed herself against the barrier. Mama, please don't leave me. I don't want to be alone. Please, somebody help her. Dr. Kim stood slowly, her medical scanner in her hand and fury in her eyes. Dr. Keltharn, I'm officially offering my assistance as a medical professional. I brought my own supplies of cellular regeneration compounds, synthesized under Terran medical protocols. I can begin treatment immediately. You cannot, Dr. Ilan protested. Terran medical intervention on a council station without proper authorization would constitute a serious diplomatic incident. Yes, Dr. Kim replied calmly, it would. The question is whether anyone here wants to be responsible for creating that diplomatic incident by physically stopping me from saving a child's mother. She moved toward her medical kit with deliberate purpose, her companions shifting subtly to support her action. The council guards tensed, but found themselves facing 4 humans who radiated the quiet confidence of people who had faced far worse odds and come out victorious. Counselor Vex processors whirred frantically as he calculated potential outcomes. A diplomatic incident with humanity would require extensive justification to the full council. The humans' recent military actions in defense of their allies had earned them significant respect and wariness among galactic powers. "Wait," Dr. Keltharn said suddenly, his voice carrying new resolve. "Dr. Kim, your offer of assistance is noted. However, as Chief Medical Officer of this facility, I believe I can authorize emergency treatment under the Nexus Station Medical Emergency Protocol, Section 12. Commander Thrace turned on him sharply. "Doctor, there is no emergency authorization for unregistered aliens." Dr. Keltharn's mandibles clicked rapidly as he accessed the station's legal database. "Actually, Commander, Section 12, Subsection C allows for emergency treatment of any being currently within station boundaries if their condition presents a threat to station operations or other inhabitants." How could this woman possibly threaten station operations? Counselor Vex demanded. Dr. Keltharn gestured toward the four humans, whose presence had completely altered the dynamic in the room. Diplomatic tensions arising from medical emergencies are specifically listed as operational threats. Given the current situation, I believe emergency treatment is not only authorized, but required to prevent potential station-wide security concerns. Dr. Kim smiled for the first time since entering the medical bay. "Doctor, that's the most creative interpretation of medical regulations I've ever heard." "I like creative." "It's also completely correct," Dr. Keltharn replied, already moving toward the treatment storage units. "Nurse Technician Zephyr, please prepare Cellular Regeneration Treatment Protocol 7 for immediate implementation." A small, crystalline being who had been watching the proceedings with fascination quickly began preparing the treatment equipment. "Yes, Doctor. Treatment Protocol 7 prepared and ready for implementation." As Dr. Keltharn began the process of saving Lynn's life, Master Chief Chun turned to the council officials with satisfaction evident in his expression. "Gentlemen, lady, it's been a pleasure working with you to resolve this situation. The galaxy needs more creative problem solvers like Dr. Keltharn." Zara watched through her tears as the blue healing liquid began flowing into her mother's treatment chamber, and for the first time in 18 days, her sobs turned to laughter. "Thank you," she whispered to the humans who had changed everything simply by refusing to accept that nothing could be done. Outside the medical bay, word was already spreading through Nexus Station's communication networks. For humans had arrived, heard a child crying, and within minutes had completely upended established council protocols through nothing more than moral conviction and the implicit threat of human displeasure. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity's most dangerous weapon wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their absolute refusal to mind their own business when someone was suffering. The news of what happened in Medical Bay 7 spread through Nexus Station like wildfire through dry grassland. Within hours, every communication terminal, personal data pad, and neural interface on the massive station buzzed with the story of 4 humans who had walked into an impossible situation and made it possible through sheer force of moral conviction. In the diplomatic corridor, Ambassador Kellyan of the Vorthan Confederacy set down his morning nutrient supplement with trembling hands as he read the initial reports. His species had a long-standing trade agreement with the Council that depended heavily on maintaining strict adherence to established protocols. The idea that such protocols could be circumvented through creative interpretation terrified him almost as much as the implications of what it meant for his own people's situation. Assistant Yorick, he called to his aide, a younger Vorthan whose scales still held the bright green of inexperience. "Send an immediate message to the Confederacy Council. Tell them we need to discuss the Kalani situation urgently." Yorick's scales darkened with confusion. "Sir, the Kalani have been attempting to gain council recognition for their refugee status for over 2 standard years. Their applications have been consistently denied due to insufficient technological contribution metrics." "Why would we?" Because Ambassador Kellyan interrupted, his voice heavy with the weight of sudden understanding. "If the humans learn that there are Kalani children dying in refugee camps while we debate technological contributions, they might decide to take another walk through a medical facility." 3 decks below, In the station's vast commercial sector, word of the morning's events had reached the ears of beings who had long ago learned to keep their heads down and accept whatever scraps of consideration the galaxy's power structure chose to offer them. But now whispered conversations began taking place in dark corners of cargo bays and service corridors. Malik, a refugee from the Outer Rim conflicts, huddled with a small group of other displaced beings around a makeshift heating unit. His species, the Kron, had lost their homeworld to mining operations 3 decades ago and had been classified as economic migrants rather than refugees, making them ineligible for most council assistance programs. "You really think it's true?" whispered Sarah, a young Kron whose web fingers had been damaged in the industrial accidents that had driven her family from their settlement. Humans actually made the council doctors treat someone who wasn't supposed to get treatment. Old Grandfather Tech, whose memory stretched back to when the Kron had first petitioned for council protection, nodded slowly. "I've heard stories about humans for years now. They fought a war once because some pirates captured a school transport. Not even human children. Mind you, some species I'd never heard of. But the humans heard about it and sent 3 battle fleets." Malik's compound eyes gleamed with something that hadn't been there for years: hope. "My daughter needs the lung reconstruction treatment. Been on the waiting list for 8 months now. They keep saying resources are limited, priorities must be observed." He looked around at his companions. What if humans heard about children who can't breathe properly while the medicine sits in storage? The idea hung in the air like a dangerous spark near ammunition. Across the commercial sector, in dozens of similar conversations, beings who had learned to accept the unacceptable began wondering what might be possible if someone with enough power actually cared about their suffering. In the security center, Chief of Station Security Kordak reviewed the incident reports with growing unease. His multiple eyes scanned the data streams, showing increased communication activity throughout the station, and the patterns were troubling. Beings who normally kept to themselves were talking. Groups that usually remained isolated were forming connections. Most concerning of all, several beings had begun inquiring about contacting human diplomatic representatives. Sergeant Vex, he called to his second-in-command, initiate communication monitoring protocol 7. Focus on any discussions involving humans, medical treatment, or appeals for assistance. Sergeant Vex, a cybernetic being whose loyalties lay entirely with station security, acknowledged the order with mechanical efficiency. "Sir, initial scans indicate over 300 active conversations involving today's medical bay incident. Should we begin intervention protocols?" Chief Kordak's mandibles clicked with frustration. "Negative. If we start arresting people for talking about humans helping a sick child, we'll create a bigger problem than we already have. Just monitor and report." Meanwhile, in the Council Administrative Center, an emergency session was being hastily organized as the implications of the morning's events became clear to those in power. Counselor Prime Zerif, whose species had founded the current galactic order, stood before a holographic display showing communication traffic patterns across not just Nexus Station, but 17 other major council installations. "Colleagues," his synthetic voice carried the weight of centuries of accumulated authority, "we face what our intelligence analysts are calling a cascade empathy event. News of this morning's medical incident has reached 14 systems, 47 major population centers, and approximately 2 billion individual beings." Counselor Vex, still processing the day's events, provided additional context through his cybernetic interface. "The human diplomatic representative has filed an official commendation for Dr. Keltharn's creative application of existing protocols to serve the greater good. They've also announced their intention to nominate him for the Galactic Medical Excellence Award." "The implications are staggering," added Counselor Thran, whose aquatic species had long specialized in information flow analysis. "If Dr. Keltharn receives human support for his actions, other medical professionals may begin interpreting protocols with similar creativity." Counselor Prime Zerif's optical sensors dimmed as he processed worst-case scenarios. "Show me the projected outcomes if this pattern continues unchecked." The holographic display shifted to show a complex web of interconnected systems, with red warning indicators beginning to spread from station to station. Computer analysis suggests that within 6 standard months, we could see a complete breakdown of resource allocation protocols. Medical treatments being provided based on need rather than species classification. Emergency authorizations being granted for emotional rather than administrative reasons. The entire foundation of orderly resource management could collapse. In the aftermath of such revelations, the Council faced a choice that had been unthinkable just hours before: adapt to a new reality where human moral standards influence galactic policy, or find a way to contain the influence before it spread beyond control. Back in Medical Base 7, Linz was showing remarkable improvement as the cellular regeneration treatment continued its work. The dark patches on her skin had begun to fade, and her breathing had steadied into a healthy rhythm. Zara sat beside her mother's bed, holding her hand and chattering excitedly about the strange aliens who had saved them. The lady doctor has soft brown eyes like the mud puddles after rain, Zara told her still sleeping mother. And the soldier man with the scars said, "I was brave for taking care of you for so long." He said humans understand about taking care of family. Dr. Kim checked her portable scanner readings and smiled with satisfaction. Your mother's cellular structure is regenerating faster than projected. She should regain consciousness within the next few hours, and full recovery will take about 2 days instead of 3. Will she really be okay? Zara asked, her purple eyes still carrying shadows of the fear that had haunted her for weeks. She's going to be fine, Dr. Kim assured her. But I want you to understand something important. What happened here today wasn't just about your mother getting treatment. It was about proving that sometimes, when enough people care about doing the right thing, impossible situations become possible. Master Chief Chun approached with a datapad in his hands. Dr. Kim, we receive a message from Earth Command. They want a full report on the situation here, and they've authorized us to extend our stay on Nexus Station for as long as necessary to ensure complete resolution of humanitarian concerns. Staff Sergeant Santos looked up from where she was teaching Zara how to braid her blue hair in the traditional human pattern called a friendship knot. Chief, I think our definition of complete resolution might be a bit broader than what the Council had in mind. Probably, Chun agreed with grim satisfaction. Corporal Mitchell, what's the communication traffic looking like? Mitchell consulted his monitoring equipment with professional thoroughness. We've got incoming messages from 17 different species representatives for refugee advocacy groups, and something called the Coalition of Forgotten Peoples requesting human assistance with various medical and humanitarian issues. Dr. Kim's eyebrows rose as she reviewed the list of requests on her own datapad. Genetic treatment for the Zelani plague, surgical intervention for mine collapse victims on Kepler-7, pediatric nutrition supplements for the Thresh refugee settlements. She looked up at her colleagues with growing understanding. We accidentally started something big here. Did we? Master Chief Chin asked with a hint of a smile. Or did we just finally give people permission to ask for help when they need it? Outside Medical Base 7, a line was forming. Not an official line, not an organized protest, just a gradual gathering of beings who had heard what happened and wanted to see for themselves. Families with sick children, elderly beings suffering from treatable conditions that weren't priority cases, individuals whose species lacked the political connections necessary to access advanced medical care. They weren't demanding treatment, weren't causing disruptions. They were simply present, quietly hoping that the miracle that had saved Linz might extend to others who needed it. Dr. Keltharn found himself facing a professional crisis that had nothing to do with medical protocols and everything to do with the oath he had taken decades ago to do no harm. Each time he walked past the growing crowd, he saw faces he recognized, beings he had been forced to turn away due to regulations, patients whose conditions he could easily treat if only they possessed the right citizenship status or species classification. Dr. Nurse Technician Zephyr approached him with crystalline features sparkling with excitement. I've been reviewing the emergency protocol that you use for the Zelani patient. Section 12, Subsection C has 17 additional subclassifications that could potentially apply to current cases. Dr. Kelthorne's 6 eyes focused intently on his subordinate. Are you suggesting that other emergency situations might exist that require immediate medical intervention? Well, Zephyr's voice carried the careful tone of someone treading on dangerous ground. If we consider the potential for diplomatic tensions arising from any medical emergencies involving beings currently within station boundaries, and if we factor in human presence and their documented tendency to intervene in humanitarian crises, Dr. Kelthorne felt something shift inside his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced since his early days as a medical student when he had first sworn to put healing above all other considerations. Nurse technician, I believe you may be correct. Please prepare emergency treatment protocols for immediate implementation. As word spread that Dr. Kelthorne was expanding his interpretation of emergency medical protocols, the line outside Medical Bay 7 grew longer. More importantly, similar conversations were beginning in medical facilities across the galaxy as healthcare professionals who had been forced to choose between their oaths and their orders suddenly discovered that creative interpretation of existing regulations could serve both. The humans had introduced something far more dangerous than any weapon into the galactic community. They had demonstrated that individual moral courage could change systems that seemed unchangeable. They had shown that sometimes the most radical act was simply refusing to accept that suffering was inevitable when the means to end it were readily available. In the depths of space, emergency broadcasts were being transmitted across the human communication network. Not military alerts or political announcements, but something far more characteristic of humanity's approach to galactic affairs: requests for volunteers. Attention medical professionals, humanitarian aid specialists, and anyone with relevant skills. We have reports of beings across the galaxy in need of assistance that's being denied due to bureaucratic obstacles. Pack your bags. Bring your medical supplies. And remember, we're not going to war. We're just going to help some people who need it. If anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with the Terran Federation Council. The galaxy was about to learn that there were few things more dangerous than humans who had decided that someone needed help. The first human medical transport arrived at Nexus Station exactly 72 hours after Linz had opened her eyes to find her daughter sleeping peacefully beside her hospital bed. The ship wasn't particularly large by galactic standards, but its cargo manifest sent shock waves through the Council's administrative networks. 15 tons of medical supplies, 12 volunteer doctors, 36 nurses, and equipment that could establish a fully functional emergency hospital capable of treating any known species. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood on the bridge of the Medical Transport Compassion's Edge, reviewing status reports from across human space with the focused intensity that had made her legendary during the Frontier Wars. Her silver hair was pulled back in a regulation military bun, but her eyes held the warm determination that had earned her the nickname the Angel of the Outer Rim among refugee populations across 17 systems. Captain Morrison, she addressed her ship's commander, a grizzled veteran whose own medical background made him perfect for this unprecedented mission. What's our current status with station control? Captain Morrison consulted his communication logs with obvious amusement. Admiral, Station Control has been trying to contact Earth Command for authorization to deny us docking rights for the past 6 hours. They seem to be having trouble reaching anyone who will give them the answer they want. And what answer are they getting? That the Terran Federation recognizes the sovereign right of Council stations to control their docking facilities, but that they also recognize the universal right of humanitarian organizations to provide aid to those in need. Our diplomatic corps has been remarkably unhelpful in clarifying which right takes precedence. Admiral Torres smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had spent decades finding creative solutions to impossible problems. I love diplomatic ambiguity. Signal Station Control that we're requesting emergency docking for medical supply delivery and humanitarian consultation. If they deny us, we'll establish a humanitarian aid station just outside their territorial boundary and offer free transportation for anyone who needs medical attention. On Nexus Station, Chief of Security Kordak was discovering that dealing with humans was like trying to contain water with a net made of regulations. Every attempt to limit their activities created new opportunities for them to expand their influence, and their approach to following rules made his security protocols completely ineffective. Sir, Sergeant Vex reported with mechanical precision. The humans have submitted 17 different requests for humanitarian aid consultations, 12 applications for temporary medical facility establishment, and 5 formal invitations for council representatives to tour their ship's medical capabilities. And if we deny these requests, according to their communications, they will respect our decision while exercising their right to broadcast live medical lectures to any beings who wish to learn about treatment options for various conditions. They specifically mentioned that they plan to discuss cellular regeneration therapy, pediatric nutrition protocols, and surgical techniques for treating victims of industrial accidents. Kordak's multiple eyes closed in a gesture of profound frustration. They're going to teach people about treatments they can't access here, creating demand for services we're not authorized to provide. The psychological warfare implications are indeed concerning, Vex agreed. Additionally, they've announced that any being who travels to human space for medical treatment will receive care regardless of species, citizenship status, or ability to pay. The invitation was elegantly simple and absolutely devastating to council authority. By offering free medical care to anyone willing to make the journey to human space, the humans had created a situation where council medical protocols looked not just bureaucratic, but actively cruel by comparison. In the diplomatic quarter, emergency meetings were being held in 7 different species representative chambers simultaneously. The hegemony, confederacy, and trade union found themselves facing questions from their own populations that they had never had to answer before. Ambassador Kellyan of the Vorthan Confederacy stood before a holographic projection of his homeworld's governing council, struggling to explain how 4 humans had completely undermined centuries of established galactic medical protocols in less than a week. Honorable counselors, his voice carried the strain of someone delivering news he knew his audience didn't want to hear. The situation has evolved beyond a simple medical incident. Human aid organizations are now coordinating with refugee groups across 17 systems. Their medical ships are establishing treatment centers in international space, just outside Council jurisdiction. Can't the Council Navy prevent this? Asked Counselor Prime Vel, her aquatic features rippling with agitation. The humans are operating in open space, providing free medical care to anyone who requests it. Any military action against humanitarian aid ships would be, he paused, searching for diplomatic language, politically problematic. What he didn't say, but everyone understood, was that attacking human medical ships would likely result in the arrival of human military forces, and no species in the galaxy wanted to find out what humanity's response to such an action would look like. Back on Nexus Station, Zara had become an inadvertent celebrity among the station's population. Beings would approach her and her mother during their daily walks, asking to hear the story of how the humans had saved them. Each telling seemed to spread the tale further, and with each repetition, the story grew into something larger than its simple facts. Tell us again about the soldier lady, requested a young Kron whose respiratory issues had been deemed non-essential by station medical protocols. Tell us what she said about rules and helping people. Zara, now fully recovered and glowing with the health that cellular regeneration therapy had restored to her small body, repeated Staff Sergeant Santos's words with the precision of someone who had found profound meaning in them. She said that rules are supposed to help people, not hurt them. And when rules hurt people instead of helping them, then the rules are broken, not the people. Her mother, Linz, watched these interactions with growing amazement. Her daughter had become a living symbol of the possibility that things could change, that the galaxy's power structures weren't immutable laws of nature, but human-made systems that could be challenged and improved. Mama, Zara asked one evening as they watched the human medical transport dock at Nexus Station despite ongoing council protests, Why do the humans care so much about people they don't even know? Linz considered the question carefully, thinking about everything she had learned from watching the humans work over the past week. I think, she said slowly, that humans understand something that many other species have forgotten. They understand that suffering isn't something that happens to other people, it's something that happens to people, and that makes it everyone's concern. Dr. Kim, who had been making daily visits to check on her patients, overheard the conversation. That's probably the most accurate description of human psychology I've ever heard, she said with a smile. We're not actually more compassionate than other species. We're just really bad at minding our own business when someone needs help. Her joke carried deeper truth than she might have intended. Human history was indeed filled with examples of their species inserting themselves into conflicts and crises that didn't directly concern them, but almost invariably on the side of those who couldn't protect themselves. On the newly arrived human medical ship, Admiral Torres was conducting what she diplomatically termed humanitarian consultations with a steady stream of beings who had traveled from across the station to learn about treatment options for various medical conditions. What she was actually doing was documenting every case of treatable suffering being denied due to bureaucratic obstacles, building a comprehensive database that would shortly be transmitted to every human world. Dr. Martinez, she addressed her chief medical officer. What's our current case load looking like? Dr. Elena Martinez, whose specialty in xenobiology made her invaluable for treating non-human patients, consulted her extensive notes. Admiral, we've documented over 300 cases of beings suffering from easily treatable conditions who've been denied care due to species classification issues, citizenship problems, or resource allocation policies. Additionally, we've identified 17 refugee populations across 9 systems who are experiencing medical crises that could be resolved with supplies we currently have in surplus, and our capacity for expanding operations. Earth Command has authorized the deployment of 15 additional medical transports, with more available if needed. The Centauri Medical College has volunteered to establish mobile medical schools to train local practitioners in advanced treatment techniques. And she paused with barely contained excitement. The Titan Industrial Consortium has offered to begin mass production of medical equipment specifically designed for distribution to underserved populations. Admiral Torres nodded with satisfaction. When humans decided to solve a problem, they approached it with the same overwhelming commitment that had once allowed them to wage war across the galaxy. The difference was that this time, they were deploying that commitment in service of healing rather than destruction. Signal Earth Command, she ordered. Inform them that we're implementing Operation Good Neighbor. Authorization requested for full humanitarian deployment across all systems reporting medical access issues. The implications of such an operation were staggering. Operation Good Neighbor was humanity's contingency plan for large-scale humanitarian intervention, designed to provide medical, educational, and infrastructure support to any population that needed it, regardless of political complications or diplomatic considerations. It had never been deployed before because the galaxy had never presented a situation that required its implementation. But the cascade of revelations following Zara's rescue had revealed suffering on a scale that demanded a response commensurate with humanity's resources and determination. On Nexus Station, word of the humans' expanding medical operations had reached beings who had long ago given up hope of receiving proper medical care. The line outside Medical Base 7, which had started as a few dozen curious onlookers, had grown into a permanent encampment of beings waiting for their chance to access the treatments that had previously been denied to them. Dr. Keltharn found himself at the center of a revolution he had never intended to start. His creative interpretation of emergency medical protocols had inspired medical professionals across the galaxy to begin questioning their own institution's policies, leading to what galactic media was calling the Great Medical Awakening. Nurse technician Zephyr approached him with barely contained excitement. I've been monitoring medical networks across 17 systems. Over 200 medical facilities have begun implementing expanded emergency protocols based on our precedent. Patient treatment rates have increased by an average of 40%. Dr. Kelthorne's mandibles clicked with amazement. 200 facilities? How is that possible? Apparently, sir, many medical professionals have been looking for justification to provide treatments they've been forced to deny. Your actions gave them the legal precedent they needed to follow their medical oaths instead of administrative policies. The revolution that had started with 4 humans refusing to ignore a crying child had become a galaxy-wide movement of medical professionals rediscovering their primary obligation to heal rather than administer bureaucracy. In the council chambers, emergency sessions were being held around the clock as representatives struggled to respond to a situation that had no precedent in galactic history. Never before had a single humanitarian incident triggered such widespread systematic change. And never before had the galaxy's established power structures faced a challenge that couldn't be resolved through traditional diplomatic or military means. The humans have effectively weaponized compassion, Counselor Prime Zerif observed with something approaching admiration. They've created a situation where opposing their actions requires us to take public positions against providing medical care to suffering beings. More than that, added Counselor Vex, his cybernetic components processing vast streams of data, they've demonstrated that our resource allocation protocols were based on artificial scarcity rather than actual limitations. The treatments being provided now were always available. We simply chose not to provide them. The uncomfortable truth was becoming impossible to ignore. The galaxy's suffering hadn't been caused by insufficient resources or technological limitations, but by institutional choices to prioritize some lives over others based on political and economic considerations rather than medical need. As reports continued to flow in from across human space about massive mobilization of medical resources and volunteer aid workers, the Council faced a choice that would define the future of galactic civilization. Adapt to a new reality where suffering was treated as unacceptable regardless of the sufferer's political status, or find themselves increasingly irrelevant as beings chose to seek help from those willing to provide it unconditionally. The humans hadn't conquered the galaxy through superior firepower or technological advancement. They had conquered it through the simple act of caring about suffering and possessing the resources and determination to do something about it. And they were just getting started. 6 months after Zara's cries had echoed through the corridors of Nexus Station, the galaxy looked like a fundamentally different place. The change hadn't come through war, revolution, or political upheaval, but through something far more profound and lasting. The simple recognition that suffering was a problem to be solved rather than a condition to be managed. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the newly constructed Humanitarian Coordination Center on Nexus Station, reviewing reports that would have been unimaginable just months before. The facility, built with joint Human Council resources, served as the central hub for coordinating medical and humanitarian aid across 17 star systems. Admiral Torres, she addressed the senior human representative. The latest statistics are remarkable. Medical treatment availability has increased by 600% across Council space. Refugee resettlement programs have processed 4 times their historical numbers, and we're seeing the first generation of what xenosociologists are calling post-scarcity compassion societies. Admiral Torres, now serving as the Director of Galactic Humanitarian Operations, smiled as she watched through the center's massive windows. Below them, beings from dozens of species worked together in medical facilities that had once been restricted to the politically connected elite. The numbers are impressive, but I think the real victory is in the individual stories. She gestured toward a group of young beings from various species who were training together as medical technicians under the expanded education programs that had emerged from the crisis. Those kids are growing up in a galaxy where asking for help when you need it isn't a political statement. It's just normal. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. The dismantling of centuries-old resource allocation systems had created temporary chaos in some sectors, and several galactic governments had initially resisted the changes before realizing that their populations would no longer tolerate artificial restrictions on medical care. Dr. Kelthorne, now serving as the director of emergency medical protocols for the reformed Galactic Medical Consortium, had become something of a celebrity among medical professionals throughout the galaxy. His creative interpretation of emergency protocols had evolved into an entirely new framework for medical ethics that prioritized patient need over administrative convenience. The most fascinating aspect of this transformation, he explained to a gathering of medical students from 14 different species, is that none of the resources were new. The treatments, the medicines, the equipment, it was all there before. What changed wasn't our capabilities, but our willingness to use them. His 6 eyes focused on a young human student whose question had prompted his reflection. The lesson isn't that humans are superior medical practitioners, but that they possess something many of us had lost. The understanding that medical care is a right rather than a privilege. In the station's diplomatic quarter, Counselor Vex found himself grappling with philosophical questions that his cybernetic enhancements couldn't process through logic alone. The efficiency gains from removing bureaucratic barriers to medical care had been so dramatic that his own analytical systems had initially flagged them as computational errors. "The data is irrefutable," he reported to the Reformed Galactic Council, his organic, betraying emotions his mechanical half couldn't quantify. Eliminating species-based medical restrictions has resulted in a 40% reduction in overall healthcare costs, a 60% increase in treatment success rates, and immeasurable improvements in civilian satisfaction with council governance. Counselor Prime Zeruf, whose own perspective had been fundamentally altered by months of observing humanitarian operations, nodded slowly. "The humans taught us something that our millennia of civilization had somehow failed to learn, that efficiency and compassion aren't opposing values, they're complementary ones." The old council chamber had been converted into a memorial for what historians were already calling the time of turning away, a somber reminder of how easy it had been for advanced civilizations to rationalize preventable suffering. In its place, a new governing structure had emerged that included mandatory humanitarian representation and required all policy decisions to include impact assessments on the most vulnerable populations. On the residential levels of Nexus Station, Zara had grown from a desperate child into a confident young being whose experience had shaped her into an advocate for others facing medical crises. At 8 years old, she possessed a sophisticated understanding of galactic politics that came from having lived through their transformation. "Mama," she said one evening as they prepared dinner in their new apartment, "do you think things will stay this way? Will the galaxy keep helping people who need it?" Linz, whose recovery had been so complete that she now worked as a volunteer coordinator for refugee assistance programs, considered her daughter's question carefully. "I think," she said, "that once you've seen that suffering doesn't have to be accepted, it becomes very hard to go back to accepting it." She gestured toward the window, where they could see human and non-human medical ships arriving and departing in a constant stream of humanitarian activity. "The humans didn't just save us, sweetheart. They showed the entire galaxy that caring about strangers isn't weakness. It's the foundation of real civilization." The human approach to galactic citizenship had indeed created what sociologists termed a cascade paradigm shift. Species that had spent centuries competing for limited resources had discovered that cooperation and mutual aid actually expanded available resources for everyone. Master Chief Chun, now serving as the senior military advisor for humanitarian security operations, found himself commanding forces that included volunteers from 47 different species, all united by the simple mission of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. "It's remarkable," he observed to his staff during a planning session for aid operations in the Kepler system, "how many beings were just waiting for permission to be decent to each other. We didn't teach the galaxy compassion, we just demonstrated that acting on it was possible." Dr. Kim, who had returned to Earth briefly before accepting a permanent position as Director of Xenological Emergency Medicine, had established training programs that were producing a new generation of medical professionals whose primary allegiance was to healing rather than institutional protocols. "The most important lesson," she told her students, "isn't any specific treatment technique or diagnostic procedure. It's that when you see suffering that you can relieve, The only ethical response is to relieve it. Everything else is just excuses. Her words had become something of a motto for the new generation of medical professionals, who wore them proudly on their uniforms alongside symbols representing their commitment to universal care regardless of species, citizenship, or politics. Staff Sergeant Santos had transitioned to heading security for humanitarian operations, leading teams that specialized in protecting aid workers and medical personnel in dangerous situations. Her approach to security planning had become legendary for its effectiveness and its absolute commitment to civilian safety. The thing people don't understand about humanitarian security, she explained to new recruits, is that the best weapon you can carry is a reputation for helping people. When populations know you're there to help, not hurt, they become your biggest source of protection and intelligence. Her teams had successfully completed over 200 humanitarian missions without a single civilian casualty, establishing new standards for protective operations that prioritize de-escalation and community engagement over traditional military tactics. The economic implications of the galactic transformation had been as dramatic as the social ones. The Titan Industrial Consortium had retooled significant portions of their manufacturing capacity to produce medical equipment and humanitarian supplies, discovering that the market for compassion technology was virtually unlimited. Turns out, observed CEO Sarah Chun at a gathering of industrial leaders, that building things that heal people instead of hurt them is incredibly profitable when you're selling to a galaxy that's decided it cares about healing. The consortium's medical technology exports had become the foundation of a new economic model based on mutual aid rather than competitive scarcity, with human worlds serving as technological centers for humanitarian innovation. Perhaps most importantly, the children who had grown up during the transformation were creating a generation that saw interspecies cooperation and universal healthcare access as normal rather than exceptional. Schools across human space and Council territory now included mandatory courses in humanitarian citizenship that taught young beings to see suffering as a shared problem requiring collective solutions. Zara, now recognized as a symbol of the transformation, often spoke to these classes about her experience and the lessons it had taught her about the power of individual action within larger systems. The important thing to remember, she would tell her young audiences, is that the adults who saved my mama weren't superheroes or magical beings. They were just people who decided that watching someone suffer when they could help was unacceptable. All of you have that same choice every day. As the 6-month anniversary of the initial incident approached, Nexus Station prepared for what had become known as Compassion Day, a galaxy-wide celebration of humanitarian achievement and a renewal of commitment to universal aid principles. The celebration would feature medical exhibitions, cultural exchanges, and recognition ceremonies for beings who had demonstrated exceptional commitment to helping others. But its real significance lay in what it represented: a galaxy-wide acknowledgement that the highest achievement of civilization wasn't technological advancement or military power, but the elimination of preventable suffering. Admiral Torres, reflecting on the transformation from her office overlooking the Humanitarian Coordination Center, received a communication from Earth Command requesting her assessment of the operation's long-term sustainability. Her response was brief but comprehensive. The revolution in galactic humanitarian policy appears to be permanent because it's based on something more reliable than political agreements or economic incentives. It's based on the discovery that helping each other feels good and works better than not helping each other. Once that realization takes hold, it's very difficult to unrealize. The galaxy had learned that humans possessed many remarkable qualities: technological innovation, military effectiveness, economic productivity. But their most dangerous and valuable trait was their inability to walk away from suffering when they possessed the means to alleviate it. That trait had infected the galaxy like a beneficial virus, spreading from species to species until the idea of denying medical care based on bureaucratic classifications seemed not just cruel, but fundamentally stupid. In the end, the greatest human achievement wasn't conquering the galaxy through superior force, but teaching it to conquer suffering through superior compassion. They had weaponized empathy and deployed kindness on a scale that made traditional warfare obsolete. As Zara looked out at the stars from her apartment window, watching medical ships travel between worlds like antibodies in a vast galactic circulatory system, she understood that her mother's life had been saved not just by advanced medicine, but by the revolutionary idea that her life was worth saving regardless of her species or citizenship status. The galaxy had learned to cry for all its children, and, in learning to cry for them, had learned to heal them. It was perhaps the most human lesson of all.